Hello and welcome to the 7-year anniversary episode of The Business of Story. I'm your host, Park Howell, and I'm delighted that both you and I are still here after 7 years and 366 episodes later. Now, I just learned with today's guest that I could actually sell the Business of Story podcast on his platform, Flippa.com, the largest marketplace for online businesses. I had no idea the service even existed. Our guest, Blake Hutchison, CEO of Flippa.com, will show you how they use storytelling to drive buyers and sellers to their platform, which, believe it or not, for the period of January to May 2022, added $72 billion in liquid capital just waiting to be invested or deployed in online businesses through its buyer network. $72 billion. That's amazing. But before we dive into the show, I want to mark our 7th anniversary with a few shout outs to folks that have made this all happen right here at the Business of Story. First of all, thank you, Jay Baer of Convince and Convert, for inspiring me to launch the Business of Story on July 1, 2015. You invited me in as one of your first shows in the Convince and Convert podcast network and graciously opened up both your team and your audience to help catapult us into the podcast world. You do not know how much I appreciate that, and you. Next up, thank you, Lisa Leffler. You were a huge help to get me organized in my production and to guide me through the promotion of the show in the early years. Absolute invaluable professional help. Can't thank you enough. I'd like to also give a big shout out to our son, Caden Howell, who has brought his audio talents to producing the past 2 years of our shows. Thanks, Cade. You've made each episode absolutely shine. Another huge hug goes out to the person who has helped me long before the first episode aired all those years ago, and that's Marissa Hill, who manages everything from our promotion and community development to managing me. Marissa, you're the best. Oh, and of course, thanks to all of our amazing story artist guests from around the world who graciously shared their storytelling tips to help you, our listeners, excel through the stories you tell. And finally, thank you for listening. Just by being here, you are making this 7th anniversary episode all the more special. Story on, my friend. Now, have you built an online product that might be of interest to a buyer? It could be a blog, a podcast, an app, maybe a SaaS platform, or some other online business, and you might be interested in selling it. Maybe you're a buyer seeking a windfall. Or perhaps you're just interested in how the largest marketplace for online businesses uses story mastery to build its own online business. If so, then this show is for you.
What we're here to do is to democratize the exit, make exit opportunities, which have typically been reserved for stories in Forbes and Entrepreneur and the New York Times and every other publication that wants to celebrate people who are already rich getting richer, and make that prospect of an exit available to anyone who owns any business of any type, anywhere in the world.
Blake Hutchison has been involved in growth stage businesses and in leadership roles for the past 15 years at Luxury Escapes, Zero, and Lonely Planet, and accordingly has a unique understanding of SaaS, e-commerce, and publishing businesses. He also has a unique appreciation and respect for the startups and small business owners using Flippa, as he was the founder of venture-backed startup Good44, an e-commerce marketplace for specialty retailers. Today, Blake shares how they use their YouTube series called Making Millionaires to share the stories of the successful exits via Flippa.com and the proven template they use to tell those stories. You'll hear about a Florida police officer who gave up her salary 25 years ago to build a healthcare certification portal when she knew nothing about the internet or healthcare certification, and then sold it through Flippa.com, setting her up for financial freedom. Plus, Blake shares the 3 things you need to think about to publish a blog that becomes a desirable acquisition. Oh, yeah, I almost forgot. There is an incredible story at the end of the show, and I mean after the closing music, that Blake shared when we were chatting after the interview. Luckily, I kept the recording button on. You're not going to want to miss it. So please welcome to this special 7th anniversary episode of The Business of Story, Blake Hutchison. Hey, Blake, welcome to the show.
Hey, Park, thanks for having me. Nice to be here.
Now, judging by the accent, you're not coming to me from down the road in Arizona.
I'm not in Arizona, although I've been there. It's a great place. I am calling you from Melbourne, Australia, so it's tomorrow for you.
We had talked the other day, and I mentioned that I got a chance to visit your beautiful city, Melbourne, right before COVID, thank God, March of 2019. And a gentleman there invited me on his racing sailboat the very last night we were there. And I got to spend 2 or 3 hours out in the harbor there. What's the name of the harbor?
Port Phillip Bay. Port
Phillip Bay.
Yeah.
And it was a 42-foot racing schooner, and it was so much fun. I got to tell you, I was up on the side, starboard side, and they had the guys, they were all in their racing gear, of course, and I had, my life jacket on and my Ray-Bans, and I think I was getting in their way because, you know what they did to me, Blake? They sent me downstairs into the galley, and they said, oh, you are going to man the spinnaker. So when we pull it down, you drag it in, and when we put it up, you hand it to us, but don't move. And I go, I'm on to you. I get it. I'm an anchor up top, but down below, I can actually bring some value.
Value is all you needed to bring, but it's good fun out there. It's a nice bay, and if you get a really, really calm evening, you can probably move pretty quickly, I would have thought.
Yeah, it was great fun. I think we came in 8th place out of 12 boats, so I may well have been an anchor on that team that day. But great to have you here. We're talking about your enterprise, Flippa. And at first blush, when you look at that enterprise, I thought, oh, this is just kind of an online way to maybe, make some quick money, doing some things, buying online properties and whatever. But then after talking to you, I realized there's such a much greater purpose to it. And the work that you are doing with small businesses around the world, I thought was really amazing. So let's back into this story by giving us a little bit of your backstory and how you found yourself as CEO of Flippa.
It was a roundabout story. I mean, I've lived all over the world. I've lived in Tokyo. I've lived in San Francisco and New York, and obviously here in Melbourne, Australia. Interestingly enough, I probably got, I suppose, the entrepreneurial itch, having spent a lot of time in San Francisco. And, that led me, having worked for a few startups there, to start my own business back in Australia. So I moved back home in 2010, and I set up what was initially an online publication, essentially celebrating lifestyle in the major cities of Australia, similar to lots of the lifestyle publications there in the US. And that quickly turned into an e-commerce business, enabling specialty retailers to trade their product on our platform. So chocolate makers and honey makers and cheese makers and anyone else who was in the specialty food space. That business, believe it or not, Park, I ended up, at least attempting to sell on Flippa. So that was my first introduction to the brand that I am now the CEO for. And ever since that time, I've been a little bit intrigued as to the nature of, Flippa, the Flippa customer base, what it was trying to achieve. Fast forward 5 years, and, I found myself talking to key board members at Flippa who needed some help in growing the business. But it's been a really unique experience for me because business owners from all over the world sell on our platform, and they sell e-commerce businesses and content businesses and apps, and they're all made up of different business models. And it happens to be that my story's reasonably unique in the sense that I've worked in publishing, I've worked in cloud accounting software, I've worked in e-commerce, and I'm now working in a marketplace. So that varied business model experience gives me quite a unique approach to building something for our very diverse customer base around the world.
What are the kinds of products, businesses people can buy on Flippa?
Yeah, the most common business is a content website. So it's a blog, and that blog could be about anything, but certainly, as you could imagine, we have huge amounts of demand for blogs in the travel industry, huge amounts of demand for blogs in the food space. huge amounts of demand for blogs in the building and architectural industry or architect industry. The second most common is an e-commerce business. So that could be a business built on top of Shopify or BigCommerce or WooCommerce. We're starting to see really great demand for SaaS applications, software as a service, as well as apps. So, the apps that we all have on our phone, there's about 25 to 50 brand name players that we can all just reel off, right? TikTok and Instagram and Facebook. But beyond that, there's this really long tail app publisher network from all over the world. And those app publishers get their apps to a certain size. They then list them on Flipper. And now there's a bunch of institutional buyers looking to acquire those apps. So it's a range, a really, really substantial range. And that's the great thing about it. We get to represent small business owners from all over the world doing really unique things.
It's interesting. I never thought about selling a blog that way. So say, for instance, let's take your example of the travel industry. Maybe I've got a big, robust travel agency working out of Flagstaff, Arizona here, and I want to build some more SEO and some more inbound traffic, but I don't have time to craft all my own blog posts and do that kind of business. I want to accelerate that because we know to build your own content as a creator, well, gosh, it takes 18 months to get any sort of significant following at all, and then you've got years into it.
Right.
FeedSpot just named me the number one business storytelling podcast for 2022, and it only took me 350 episodes to get there. So what you're saying is instead of doing that, I can go to Flippa and say, here's a voice I like, here's a blog that seems like it would work with our business, and they go and they pay and then bring over all that content? And even the writers to keep writing? Or
Yeah, so Park, you've nailed that on the head because as you just said, I think you said 350 episodes, and now you're getting all of the credit that you deserve. But that's effort. That's blood, sweat, and tears. The recruitment of guests coming in to speak to you, and all those types of things. So as you just said, there are people who say, "Well, yeah, I need great content, but I don't have the capacity to build it, nor do I know how to do that over such a long stretch of time." So they go and acquire that audience. So, for example, the website visitmaine.com sold on Flipper, right? Visit Maine. And that's a travel website. Clearly, it's about Maine. And I think you would pronounce that better than I would, Park. But anyway.
No, you nailed the state of Maine, correct?
Maine. That's correct.
Yep, nailed it.
Now that was acquired, and it's acquired because someone understands that there is a lot of people who travel to Maine, and therefore when they type in, "I want to visit Maine" or "travel to Maine," Maine pops up. Google shows it. I go visit that website. That website will be making money through either travel bookings or probably affiliate revenue, sending traffic off elsewhere. And that's acquired. It's acquired because someone recognizes the value in the asset, and someone recognizes the value in the audience that is consuming that content.
It's already pre-built for them, so they don't have to go through all the gyrations to do that.
That's right.
Yeah, totally makes sense. So in the very noisy world out there, I'm going to be selling a blog, and again, it's not something I'd really considered much before. What keeps your customers from going to, a venture capitalist or angel money or someone like that to come in and buy it? How are you different than that?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I mean, it's probably best defined by the difference between a small business owner and a startup. And so, startups are set out to achieve, of course, not many achieve it, but they are set out to achieve infinite scale. And so you're talking about big target addressable markets. You're talking about typically technology-backed enterprises. Whereas a blog or an e-commerce business, they are essentially small business owners. They are the new age small business owner. They just happen to be digital. And they're less likely to be appealing to venture capital or private equity. The other piece relates to, the way a small business owner treats their businesses. I mean, ultimately, they're often there to either give you cash flow generation off the back of a traditional 9-to-5 vocation, or they are full-time enterprises, but I'm paying myself in full every month with the earnings out of the business versus redeploying that capital back into the business to drive further growth. So they're just different in their nature. And so the average business that sells on Flipper is $600,000, whereas the average business backed by private equity and venture capital may be delivering $600,000 in revenue to begin with, but has infinite scale probability or potential. So that hopefully gives you a sense. And as a result, there's some fantastic stories on our platform. So one of my favorites, Crochet Kim. Now you can imagine what we're dealing with here, Park. So that is a crochet blog, and it's run by a woman called Kim. And so Crochet Kim is a community of people interested in crochet. And this is a 25-year-long passion for this individual. And so she is using that blog to earn an income. But better than that, when she gets to retirement age, she can use something like Flipper to realize value in that asset. And somebody else with a really, really strong commercial orientation recognizes the strength of that community and the opportunity to continue to grow what they don't see as a blog, what they see as a genuine business. And so for Kim, it becomes a really, really, really fantastic way to, I suppose, end what was a 25-year-long passionate love affair with crochet and manifesting a community around that. So that's just one example.
So Kim could use it, and people just like Kim use it as an exit strategy. They build it and they say, here's an easier way of getting out than the old, more convoluted VC way or something coming in to represent or broker your company.
Yeah, that's right. And, a lot of investors and buyers are recognizing that this is a real asset class. And so, for Crochet Kim, she saw it as a lifestyle business. But for an investor, they see it as a cash flow generating asset. And they might pool a few of these together and then, bring in some expertise to manage multiple sites. And so we see that happening with these great stories from all over the world, business owners who have toiled away at a passion project and then get the opportunity to realize that critical value.
And Blake, how do you all use story and business storytelling to market Flipper and get people interested in it?
Yeah, it's a really important question for us. We have what we call owned assets, and I'll quickly talk you through them. But the first one is the Exit podcast. It's a bit similar to what you're doing. We're just telling stories of passionate entrepreneurs who have successfully exited their businesses, and use that as those stories are used to inspire the next generation entrepreneurs. And Flipper happens to attach its brand to it. And so, for example, our 100th episode is coming up very shortly, and we'll have the CEO and co-founder of Zappos, of course, one of the co-founders of Zappos, who ultimately sold that business to Amazon. And so that's a really great way of telling a story to inspire the next generation entrepreneurs and hopefully attach the Flipper brand and build some credibility for our brand around that story. In addition to that, we have a great video series called Making Millionaires, and it's absolutely just about the stories of these individuals. So there was a tattoo artist, and he bought a blog called Tattooing 101, and he bought that to supplement his tattooing career, and ultimately then scaled it to 7 figures and sold it back on Flipper. So, that those two alone, the Making Millionaires video series and the Exit podcast, are great examples of the power of storytelling.
And the video series resides on YouTube, so anyone can go in and watch it, Making Millionaires?
That's exactly right. They're between 2.5 to 4 minutes long, so it's short form content, and it's not about Flipper. It's about the story of the individual and how they got to where they are today.
Do you have a template that you follow with your storytelling?
We do typically, yes, just because, we understand that audiences are looking to get something in particular out of each of the stories. But, as people can take you in weird and wonderful directions when they're telling their stories. So we're flexible and malleable in that regard. But yeah, we typically start where did they begin their entrepreneurial journey? We then move to how long did they build for, and what were the challenges in building? If they're sellers, we then say, what was the sales process like, and what would you teach other people who are about to go through this process? And then finally, we end with, what are you up to now? Because that's the great thing about exiting. when Crochet Kim sells her blog on Flipper and she's suddenly now got a bank balance bigger than she did prior to selling it on Flipper, that's a great story to tell because that's the fun bit. What are you up to now? So we focus there.
What about that one story you shared with me yesterday about the police officer and what she did with Flipper? I thought that was a pretty interesting story.
Yeah, I love that story, Park. It was a surprise to me. I must admit, I jumped on a seller interview and was able to learn from this woman based in Florida that approximately 22 to maybe 25 years ago, she was a policewoman based in Florida and she wanted to do something different. And quite incredibly, without knowing too much about digital and or online business models, she walked into Barnes & Noble when Barnes & Noble still existed. Do they still have stores? Do Barnes & Noble still have stores there, Park?
You know, they just closed down the one up in Flagstaff, and Goodwill of Central and Northern Arizona is moving in because they do such a bang-up business there. But no, Barnes & Noble has gone the way of the buffalo, as we say.
So she walks into Barnes & Noble and she buys Building a Website for Dummies. And this interview is about to come out on our blog, by the way, so check it out. But it's quite a beautiful story. So she buys Build a Website for Dummies, walks out of Barnes & Noble, and she starts to look around for niches and, you know, clearly a clever person. She finds a gap and builds a website. You can go and check it out. It's called Online Med Certs. Online Med Certs. And so she builds this medical certification company online, just learning the ways of digital as well as the ways of that particular category and niche, which is clearly important. And she starts selling medical certifications to medical professions all over the US where you need either 6 monthly or annual certifications. Long story short, she runs that business for about 20 years. But the good news is she replaces her police officer's salary. That's great. So problem solved number one. And then she lists it on Flipper some 20 years later and sells it for about the value of five years annual salary. So not only has she got an income for the past 20 years, which has replaced her earning potential as a police officer, but she's then gone and sold that and received 5 times that on exit. And that's just a great example of the power of digital and the power of a bit of intellectual curiosity. And then fantastic for us, we get to tell the story.
And that website is Online Med Certs, as in certifications, CERTS.com, correct?
That is correct.
And did she say, I'm eager to see her story, did she say in all of the things that she could be doing online, why she went to medical certification?
She does. She talks through that. And bless her, the intellectual curiosity is quite unique. For her, it was a function of if I remember correctly, she had met someone in the space and then she started to look around to see whether there was a online equivalent. So clearly you could go and get medical certifications in certain places, but could you do it online? And then, of course, she probably got lucky. It was quite serendipitous because she probably, given Build a Website for Dummies was her book purchase, she probably didn't quite know that Online Med Certs is a beautiful SEO term, search engine optimized term, because Google loves when you type in something so specific and then there's a domain name that matches it. And so people are probably just typing in all over the world, online med certifications or online medical certifications. And of course, she's popping up as number one. So
that's brilliant. How many different products offerings do you have on Flippa.com?
So at any given time, there's around 6,000 businesses for sale. But of course, they rotate. So new ones come on each month. I think there's around 2,000 to 2,500 new businesses that come on each month, apologies. And it's sites, stores, and apps. So we have sold podcasts. So we'll move into that space. We have seen YouTube channels sell on the platform. So we'll move into that space. But the core business is sites, stores, and apps. The US is our biggest market for obvious reasons. but we do have quite a really strong following all over the globe.
So say you're going to sell the business of story for me, Blake, and you're going to make me $2 million. Thank you, by the way, for that. I appreciate it. Someone buys my show. Does that mean I have to keep interviewing? Or do people take it and say, as a part of that purchase, we'll take it from here?
Yeah. So it can happen either way, actually, Park. So they either say, gee, Park, we love your asset. We're an investor. We're not an operator. We want to buy it from you, and we want to pay you to stay on board, and we'll bonus you very, very well for continuing to make this new asset that we now own very, very successful. Or the other way that it happens is where they say, you've built a fantastic audience. We will take it from here. We have podcast experts on staff. We love the business of story concept. We love the listenership that you have built, and we'll take it from here. So it can happen either way.
So a delicate question for you, Blake, since you are the CEO of Flippa. What's the weirdest thing you have seen sell on your platform?
Oh, I hate that question. Well, I didn't see it actually. It was before my time. So I've been the CEO for 4 years, or nearly 4 years. And before my time, someone sold, I think it was glitterbomb.com. And basically it was an e-commerce website where you could send envelopes full of glitter. And of course, when the recipient opens the envelope, Park, well, we know what happens to the glitter, right? So I'm not that proud of that particular sale, I must say. But, you asked for me for the weirdest one, and that's the one I'm going to give you.
That is weird. Any idea what glitterbomb.com went for?
I think I can probably find the answer to that. Ask me another question. I'll find you the price for Glitterbomb.
So when you got into this, Blake, have you always been kind of a natural storyteller when it comes down to all the different enterprises that you've run in the past and your varied experience?
I don't think I've been a natural, but I've learned the power of it. And ultimately, we can talk about how good a business we are, but it's really the business owners that either list or acquire on our platform that make Flippa what it is today. And when you see how emotional and how excited somebody is when they successfully exit, you can recognize pretty quickly how important it is that you tell that story. People in tears thanking us, people talking about the fact that, before they found Flippa, they hadn't known what to do, but they acquired a business for $7,500. They grew it to $550,000, sold it on the platform, and now they're hooked on acquisition entrepreneurship. So I wouldn't say I'm a natural, but when you start to see the emotional connection that your platform and product might have with someone, you have to go that way.
You are really speaking to a paradigm shift that I see happen all of the time when I'm teaching my business of story workshops out there. The first shift is your story is not about you, but your audience or your customer. In your case, you're going to tell a customer's story to connect with an audience so that the audience can live vicariously through that customer and feel the excitement of that exit that they got by working with Flippa. So that's always job number one. Your story's not about you, it's about your audience, and then you're going to select the proper customer outcome story that audience member is going to relate to. And then number two, the second shift is, by the way, your story is not about what you make, but what you make happen. So in your case, you're not out there pounding your chest about what a marvelous platform Flippa is and how easy it is to use and the customer experience is second to none and blah, 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 which is all important. But you share these stories, like you say, with Making Millionaires about, no, this is the outcome. This is what we make happen in the world.
Yeah.
A really good example of that.
100%. I mean, one of the, and it's so good when you're, the CEO of a platform like this and your video editor sends you a cut of a video and says, hey, check out this story. Isn't this going to be fun to deliver to our audience? And you press play. And the first thing that comes out of this gentleman's mouth, and he's based in Oregon, his name's Jay Hausman, and he says, I went to business school, but the acquisition and the growth of the business has taught me so much more. And I'm forever thankful to Flipper for making that opportunity available. And you're like, oh my God, as a CEO, this is just pure gold. And what we forget is we didn't ask that question. We just asked for them to tell their story. And when you ask people to tell their story, they will let you in and they will give you so much better content than if you force them to talk about, how big was the asset and why did you pay so much? And there's such great organic content out there that a lot of businesses can leverage from their customer base, but by just letting them talk.
Yeah, just a matter of capturing it, editing it so it's concise, and then sharing it out again in the world. Blake, is there one story that always comes back to you? Maybe you've already shared it here, but is there that one that you just think is that brimming example of the impact Flippa is making in the world?
Just off the top of my head right now, only because Business Insider just published his story. There's a great story of a junior associate at a hedge fund in New York. He didn't want to do that anymore. And he, I'm talking about junior, so he was straight out of college and he bought a very, very small asset on Flipper for $7,500. And so the key point is that, for a very low cost, he found himself as a CEO and business owner of, admittedly, a very small business at that time. And he spent 2.5 years learning the ways of e-commerce. And of course, we're talking about, I think this is back in 2016. So, there's a lot of ways you can learn the art of e-com now online. Well, that wasn't necessarily the case back in 2016, albeit that's not that long ago. He built that through blood, sweat, and tears, sole operator, and sold it on Flipper 2.5 years later for $550,000. He then acquired another business on Flipper. That business is now turning over $2 million. So from an intern to an acquisition entrepreneur to an e-commerce expert. And that is brilliant. And John's story is humble. It's real, and it's a great example of what you can do in the digital economy where there is such enormous opportunity ahead of people. And it's not about whether you've been to college and have the skill and have the tertiary qualifications to do it. It's about your want and desire. And I love that about that story.
Yeah, that is a pretty amazing story. What were the digital properties that he bought?
The first one was called Blush and Bar, and that is still in operation today. He no longer owns that one. That's the one he built and sold and exited for $550. The second one he bought was an online ring business, and the most recent one, apologies, I can't remember the name of that one. The most recent one is called Posh Shop. That's POSHSHOPPE, Posh Shop. And that is the one that he is currently operating, and it's doing $2 million annual turnover.
Posh Shop. I stopped at the PE and thought, man, oh man, that is a great URL, POSHSHOP, but I get the PE as well. It gives you a little bit more of that poshness to your shop, I suppose.
Yeah, so Posh Shop, and he currently runs that one. And, he's just to give you asked about storytelling, right? And
right.
He was in Austin, which is where our US office is based and where the vast majority of our staff are. And we did not ask him to do this. He knocks on the office door. He happened to be there. He knocks on the office door and he walks in and he says to our VP of sales, who is based there, "Would you mind if I speak to your staff?" We said, "No problem." He pulls out of his pocket a speech and he's in tears. And he talks about how Flipper changed his life. And I'm not there, of course, because I'm, locked up in COVID land here in Australia and they won't let us out. But the team over there is completely drawn in to the emotional connection that John has with our company. Now, how beautiful is that for me? That story inspired our team to keep doing what they did, completely unsolicited. And, that's the power, isn't it?
Wow, that is remarkable. I know when we were talking yesterday, I asked you, what is the big purpose driving the brand of Flippa? And I remember recognizing in your face a little bit of maybe a hesitancy that maybe you didn't have that immediate answer, but then one just sprang out of you very naturally. And I want to explore that just a little bit with you. What is the purpose of Flippa?
What we're here to do is to democratize the exit, make exit opportunities, which have typically been reserved for stories in Forbes and Entrepreneur and the New York Times and every other publication that wants to celebrate people who are already rich getting richer, and make that prospect of an exit available to anyone who owns any business of any type anywhere in the world. So first and foremost, it's about democratizing the exit. Now, that's the business owner side, right? And the second side is those buyers and investors who want to now go and achieve exactly what that former group did. So it's about enabling business ownership. Let's enable business ownership. Let's make it practical. Let's make it affordable. Let's make it probable for as many people around the world as we can. And that's why we call ourselves the investment bank for the 99%. We're not about the 1%. They've got a lot of support out there. We're about the 99% and ensuring that they have a platform and the advisory around them to achieve what they want to achieve on our platform, be it a successful exit or acquisition entrepreneurship.
All right, now brand building, business building advice from you, from what you've experienced and seen with Flippa. If someone out there is interested and they're like going through your website right now, flippa.com, right? Got that correct? Yeah. If you were to give them advice on the kind of business to build that you have seen to be most successfully flipped on Flippa, what might that be?
So I would say that the best business to start out with is a blog. And the reason being is that it just requires you to have a passion for a topic, a niche, a category, and then start to build on your passion through storytelling and great content. Now, that doesn't mean you need to be a great writer or a videographer. It just means you need to be able to instruct somebody else to do what you want around that category or niche. They are still in demand. Now, you talked about 350 episodes of this podcast. So I don't want anyone out there to think that I'm saying you start a blog and 6 months later you sell it for $500,000 to $1 million. That's not the case. But you start a blog, the great news is it's a niche or category that you're passionate about. So with passion should give you time. And as a result of that, 2 to 3 years later, when that blog is successfully attracting customers, it's earning some advertising revenue from simple business models powered by, Google by way of their AdSense product, or Mediavine or Ezoic, or even Amazon in the case of their affiliate program, you can find that presents a very lucrative exit opportunity. So a blog for me is still the easiest pathway to business ownership, growth, and prospective exit. The most lucrative businesses that have strong recurring customers, and that's a SaaS business. Problem with SaaS is they're hard to build, right? You got to build a product and then convince someone who's a subscriber today to stay on board next month and the month after and the month after that. So they're a bit more difficult, but they're more lucrative.
Wow, great advice. And I'm going back to that idea of that passion. It really is a passion project, isn't it? I mean, I get that question all the time is, Park, how do you keep these shows coming every Monday? And believe me, Blake, I will tell you, there's sometimes it's like, is this worth it? Do I really need to do another round of this stuff? And whenever I'm thinking that way, I always get a listener I mean, it's like the universe says, nope, don't stop what you're doing because a listener will send me a quick little story about the impact one of my guests has had on their life. And I go, yep, I guess that's why this is worth it. But when you talk about best businesses, the easiest to start being the blog, you got to have that passion if you're going to see your way through it and write and instruct. And by the way, continue to keep learning on your own because you have to be 1, 2, 3 steps ahead of your audience with knowledge, with being able to look at trends and understand how they may impact whatever you're instructing on and seeing if you can't get ahead of the curve. So it's not just the writing, but it's the research and it's even the self-improvement that goes into that because you got to try all this stuff out too to make sure that it's working. And I really believe, and by the way, those early years are very thin. It's hard to make much money early on. And so really that's all you've got driving you is that passion, something you are uniquely interested in and curious about. And then by golly, it builds a slipstream, doesn't it? There comes a following that might be, it's probably always a very narrow niche that begins to start fanning out as you get more momentum and you have more success. But boy, without that passion, you just don't have the fuel to see it through.
Yeah, that's right. And it could be passion for the category. It could be passion for the customer base. It could be passion for the business model even, right? So some people just absolutely love e-commerce optimization and the art of winning customers. Passions can come in various forms, but to your point, you have to be passionate about it for a long enough period of time to be able to achieve not only a steady source of income, but in addition to that, set yourself up for an exit. Because when a prospective buyer comes on board and says, tell me about the financial and operational performance of this asset, how it runs, how you've got it to this point in time, you'll need to be able to tell a good story around that. And that comes from time and it comes from passion.
So true. Well, Blake, thank you for your time and thank you for your passion around Flippa. And I mean, I love that overall pursuit of the venture capitalist, the investment bank for the other 99%, which, by the way, we all, for the most part, get to play in. So thank you for being here. Where can people learn more about you, your work, and Flippa itself?
Yeah, best thing, if you want to connect, ask me any questions, feel free. I'm on LinkedIn. It's a really good place to find me. My messaging is open there, so feel free to flick me any questions. It's Blake Hutchison. Just do that search on LinkedIn. You'll see me pop up as a representative of Flippa. On Twitter, I'm at Blake Now. And of course, just jump on Flippa, hit the blog, and you'll see all these stories.
Wow. Thank you for taking the time to be here. Really, really appreciate it, Blake.
Thank you so much, Park. It's been a great chat.
And thank you all for listening to this edition. If you like what you heard, or you know someone out there, if it's not you in person, but you know someone that maybe has that very robust blog or maybe a SaaS program or an app, and they built it and they're not really sure where to go next. I think of Greg Head and all the great work that he does with the startup world and the founders world and finding VC funding and exit strategies and that. A good friend of mine out of Dallas, Texas. And by the way, Blake, if you haven't seen Greg Head's work at Scaling Point, he's a guy that you should all connect with too. He's just up the road from your Austin office there in Dallas. Great guy. But what intrigues me about Flippa is so much of what he talks about and how hard it is to find the funding or to find the buyer. And what Blake is doing, they are democratizing that process. It doesn't have to mess with your brain to do it, and you don't have to be unbelievably well connected through Silicon Valley and Wall Street and other places. And by the way, having sharks out there ready to take all of your hard work and make their money on it before you get to see your margins. So check out Flippa and share this episode with anybody you know that might be in that situation that is looking to take that product and spin it, sell it, make their money that they are due and to move on. And of course, it all starts with storytelling. So if you're going to get an investor involved, a buyer involved, or you are continuing to build your brand online and off, don't forget about the storytelling part, because as Blake demonstrated, that is what really makes your business move. If I can help you, come on over to the Business of Story. And if you have not yet taken my ABT courses, the ABTs of Selling or the ABTs of Branding, those 2 little short online courses, That's the next place I'm going to drive you. It's only $35. It'll take you about 20 minutes to take, and it will revolutionize how you communicate the problem-solution dynamic that you solve on behalf of your customer. Check it out. Just go to businessofstory.com/ABT. And until next week, when we'll have another amazing story artist right here for you like Blake, remember, of course, that the most potent story you'll ever tell is the story you tell yourself. So make sure that's a great one. Thanks so much for listening.
So, Park, that one story I should have told you was the story of Martin Bispels. And he's a really interesting gentleman. He is an ex-QVC employee, was based in Manhattan. He now lives just outside of Philly. And he went from being essentially a corporate warrior, and he found, having had a passion in disc golfing, he found a disc golf backpack e-commerce business, and it's called Upper Park Disc. And so Upper Park is the brand name, and they produce backpacks, and it's a Shopify store. And he now runs this from his farm in about 30 miles out of Philly. And he's got a disc golf course on his property. And he uses that to build all the brand materials around this incredible backpack business. And how do you go from being, a QVC employee in the home, the television shopping network space, to owning your own disc golf backpack business? And I'll send you that story to share with your audience, and they'll love watching Martin Bispels on his farm shooting some discs on the course.
You know what I love about that, Blake, is so here's a guy with really two passions. He's working at QVC, so he knows what sells and what doesn't sell. But he's got this outdoor athletic passion of disc golf, frisbee golf, we call it here, but disc golf. And he finds like the ideal backpack for it. So why not? It's just that one intersection of those two hobbies, two loves in his life coming together. And he bought that on Flippa.
He bought that on Flippa, and he's currently growing that business. We talk to him regularly, and it's doing very, very well. And you know what? I said during our chat, I talked about passion, right? And niche and categories. And so sometimes what you know, other people don't know. So he says to me, yeah, but Blake, there's 50 million games of disc golf played in the US every year. And I'm like, whoa, that's a big number. I would have not had any idea, hence why you would buy an online backpacking business just for disc golf.
That is one. That is a great story, a great anecdote. The one last thing I've got to share with you is I love your accent because your A's become ER. So in America, we say flippa, you're saying flipper, and Flipper was a famous TV show when I was a kid growing up about a dolphin. So I think that's just absolutely darling.
Yeah, and dolphins are passionate animals.
Exactly right. Thanks again, Blake. Really enjoyed it.
Thanks, Buck.